Good morning. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Hey, I'm Dr. Quentin Moss, and wow, what a way to get up early in the morning. Thanks for joining. This is our live stream today, and today we're going to talk about the power of our thoughts. We're going to walk through a few theories, and we're going to talk briefly about some daily application. Again, thank you for joining me, whether you're on LinkedIn, on YouTube, or on Facebook. I appreciate that. So I'm just going to go ahead and start, and we're going to be with us a little time today. So again, we're talking about the power of our thoughts and what our thoughts are capable of doing and how we can kind of harness that energy. Just to give you some background, as I mentioned, I'm Quentin Moss. I am a psychiatrist, practice primarily in just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. But my background is I'm a graduate of Norfolk State University. I went to Eastern Virginia Medical School, did a residential program in family medicine and in psychiatry at the University of Cincinnati, where I continued on as an assistant professor, teaching medical students and residents and also performing research. Soon after that, I went into clinical trials and was a safety monitor and helping to develop some of those protocols. And soon after that, I was an inpatient psychiatric medical director, where I treated inpatient clients. I did that for 10 years at Fort Hamilton Hospital. And then ultimately, we opened up Modern Psychiatry and Wellness, which is just outside of Cincinnati in Westchester, Ohio, and in Hamilton, where we treat adults and now teenagers with an array of mental health conditions. We also have an extensive addiction recovery program called Genesis, where we help men and women have a pairing of faith-based and evidence-based interventions to help them with their sobriety and recovery. So I just want to give a shout out to my team there. They're awesome folks who do very good work. And to my COO, Susanna Lozano, who's doing a great job in helping me to lead that organization. The reason why I chose to start the practice was that I was trying to find a way that I could combine what I knew in regards to my Christian faith and spirituality, and combine that with what I knew about treating the body as a family medicine physician, and then to bring the mind and how we can address those challenges as a psychiatrist. And what has led me to understand, up to this point, is that, life, of course, is dealt with challenges. But the challenges that we have in living this life are not getting easier. As a matter of fact, they're becoming even more difficult. And I would like for us to think about some solutions to some of these common issues. For one, rarely do we ever reach our full potential. And I don't care if you have an education or not, or whether you're able to make money or not, or any of those things. Rarely, as human beings, are we able to reach our full potential. And there are a number of reasons why that occurs. And then secondly, most of us are reactive to life stressors. So when things happen, we're more likely to react as opposed to being proactive and taking the fight to those things that stress us. And then, as I mentioned before, as a psychiatrist, I definitely understand that we suffer from many mental health conditions, whether we're talking about depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder, ADHD, schizophrenia, all these things which can limit our life's progress. And then lastly, many of us live life without intention. We live from moment to moment on autopilot and allowing life to kind of drive us as opposed to we driving our lives. So I think that those are some of the key challenges that I think that many of us suffer. And as we look at our country now, even if we take away the challenges that we've had with the pandemic and the current challenge we all face in this world and dealing with Ukraine, overall the quality of life in our country has declined over the past 10 years. So this great land of riches and opportunity, even with those things in front of us, we find that overall our quality of life has declined. As a matter of fact, as we continue to climb this ladder of increasing technology, increasing digital connectedness, even when we think about social media, the more that we've gone in that direction and the more that we as a civilization has invested in that, which is supposed to connect us, it's actually left us in despair, greater risk of mental health conditions, and a greater sense of loneliness, despite all of these advances. And we can even argue that instead of, the digital world bringing us together in this country over the last few years, has probably created even more division. So there are challenges all around us as we talk about the increased depression and anxiety, as we talk about challenges in our relationships with our significant other or with our spouses, challenges in being able to meet the finances that we need. If you're an entrepreneur or a business owner trying to get your business off the ground, or whether you're someone who's an employee and just trying to make it through the daily grind, all of these things heavily impact us. As a psychiatrist, I am a strong proponent of being able to help people with their mental health conditions. I believe in counseling and how that does change the brain to allow for people to get better. I prescribe medications for a number of conditions, which allow the brain to start to heal so that people can feel and function better. But even with these interventions, we still have some limitations. We still have refractory or difficult to treat depression, refractory anxiety, psychotic illnesses that are often difficult to treat, or even how we exist in relation to other people. And that being the clinical issue, again, we still have our hurdles and obstacles. What I would like for us to do right now is just kind of take a pause. I'm going to ask that you willingly suspend your disbelief. Forget everything that you've ever learned, you've ever been taught. I would like for you to just kind of dig in with me as we take this journey and we start talking about how energy works and how our thoughts work, and perhaps how we can get even better outcomes. So the first thing that we're going to talk about, I'm going to take you back to the science books now, and it's talk about energy. And I'm going to talk about how everything has God-given energy. As we think about electrons and neutrons and protons and how they are arranged, all of those relationships within the atom help us to understand energy. And this energy can present itself in a couple of ways. It can present itself as waves or particles. And I'm going to say it again, energy can present itself as waves or particles, because it's going to be very important for some of the latter aspects of our talk today. And as energy, presents itself in various forms, it can present itself in our greatest form of energy, which is the sun, right? And our planet can't exist without the energy of the sun. But this energy expresses itself in other ways. It expresses itself through water, using gravity to be able to maximize the potential of water for energy. Energy presents itself in living things. So we think about plants, animals, human beings. We are all reservoirs of energy. All of us are reservoirs of different forms of energy. So there is this law in physics, the law of conservation. And you guys have probably heard this before. And it says that this energy cannot be created or destroyed but this energy may change from one form to the other. So this energy that comes from the sun, this energy that comes from all these other forms, this energy that's within us is never destroyed, but this energy can change forms. The second point is that our thoughts have this God-given energy. Our thoughts have this God-given energy. So when we think about scripture, and particularly in the New Testament, it talks about this dunamis and what this is, and it's described as a power that's like dynamite, right? So the Bible repeatedly speaks about this, and it talks about how this dunamis is within us, as God has already deposited this energy within us. But as we think about this energy is not, it's not a physical energy. It's not an energy to lift or to push or to crush. This energy is a mental and spiritual energy that He has deposited into all of us. There's none of us which do not have this energy. God has given us all access to this energy. And as we think about where does this energy reside, I think about the brain. The brain is composed of these billions upon billions of cells. And believe it or not, the brain has enough energy within it to actually light up a couple of light bulbs. The brain, for its size, has more energy consumption than the heart that beats in our chest. The brain is an energy powerhouse. And as we think more about the brain, our brain have these neurons or nerve cells. And these nerve cells send electrical conductance that allows for one cell to communicate with another. And these cells actually create, 10,000 connections with each other. So again, there's energy that's within us. Our brain uses a great deal of energy for thought energy, probably more energy at times per weight than any other part of our body. So when we have these thoughts, and we have about 30 to 60,000 thoughts per day, when we have these thoughts, we're able to actually create and build even within our brain. So when we have this way of repetitive thinking, of dwelling, of meditating, of focusing, when we're able to deposit that thought energy, we actually create proteins around the structures of our nerve cells. And then we have these connections, which if they're for a single purpose, they create these pathways. And if these pathways then create a way of thinking, and this way of thinking creates our perspective, or how we see everything. And then this perspective creates our worldview. And all of that is built upon these nerve cells, which then connect to each other, which then group and create pathways, which then create this thought energy that allows for us to be able to behave and think in a certain way. Now I'm going to take a little detour, and I'm going to talk about Sigmund Freud, who was an analyst in the 1800s. Now, I'm not a Sigmund Freud fan by any means, but there were a couple of things that Freud spoke about that I think do have merit. And one of those things is understanding that our thoughts are measurable units of energy. So Freud came up with this concept of the cathexis, which is that cathexis is when we have our thoughts and we invest our focus or our attention or energy on a particular person, an object, or an idea. That is our cathexis. So when we focus on anything, we are actually donating this energy to it to create it or to change it. And when I talk about energy, I'm not just talking about emotion or effort. I'm still talking about this God-given energy that resides in all things. So that when we think on things, we focus on things, we give it energy to create or change it. So an example is thought energy to solve a math problem. My kids are taking math, and God did not bless me with the gift of math. But when we focus on a math problem, we are actually donating energy to that, right? Pretty incredible. But it can be used in another way. When we take this thought energy and we focus and we dwell, for example, on our imperfections, on our inadequacies, on our sense of guilt or shame, we are also donating thought energy or any energy processes to that. And much like I said in a couple slides back, that our thoughts and energy builds proteins, right? And establishes pathways and circuits. The more that we repetitively think on these things, when we continue to have this negative thought energy, we're also creating. We're creating more symptoms. We're creating perhaps a different reality around us. We are creating things within our bodies, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So again, even when we focus that thought energy on ourselves, with that energy, there comes a consequence. So I've heard growing up this old issue of strongholds, and people have something having a stronghold on me. And oftentimes when we think about this issue of strongholds, we're thinking about something that's external to us, that's blocking us, or that's binding us, or keeping us from being able to feel what we need to feel, or to do what we need to do. And we talk about spiritually as strongholds. But I would say that those strongholds are more so internal than external. And when we have repetitive thought processes that allow for us to be able to strengthen these neurons and connections to reinforce a way of thinking and then an existence that continues to bind us, from a neuropsychiatric standpoint, that is a stronghold. And those strongholds are built with this negative thought energy. So Ralph Waldo Emerson once said that we are what we think about all day long, right? What we think about, that's typically what we become. But I think the scripture says it best in Proverbs, that as someone thinks within himself, so is he. What energy? We then create that within us. And as we create that within us, that thought energy then reaffirms and strengthens that we created ourselves to be by our thoughts. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about this thought energy and what it does to our bodies. So we've done research that shows that people can use their thoughts to speed up or slow down their heart rate. People can use their thoughts to lower their blood pressure. People can even use their thoughts to increase their body temperature. Our brain and our thought energy has that much power over our bodies. But our thought energy can also work in a different way. Sigmund Freud talked about this whole thing of hysteria back in his day. And this hysteria, meaning that people may not be able to move, become paralyzed, become lame, simply because of the thoughts that they have. So their bodies are good working condition, but because their thought energy is so strong and pervasive, it actually tricks the brain and allows the body not able to function. Today, we actually diagnose this. We diagnose this as FND, or as a functional neurological disorder. Same concept, that we have a totally healthy body, but our thought energy has changed our brains to the degree that our body is not able to function. I've talked about how I've participated in clinical trials, and I've done a little bit of research while I was at UC. And one of the things that has always amazed me is this placebo. Well, what is this placebo effect? So if I have an experiment and I give some people actual medicine, and I give some people a sugar pill, and I'm looking to see what it does to the body or mind, depending on what I'm studying. No one knows what they're getting, whether they're getting the real medicine or whether they're getting the sugar pill. The placebo effect is so strong with many of us that even when we take the sugar pill, if we believe that there's a possibility that we're actually taking medicine, our thought energy will allow for our mind and body to respond as if we're taking the real thing. So for many people, they see decrease in inflammation, or they see changes in their weight, or they see improvement with their memory or mood or anxiety simply by taking a sugar pill, because their thought energy has invested in such to believe that it works, and then we get these great changes. That is the power of the placebo effect, but it's an example of what happens with this thought energy and its impact on our bodies. There's been another experiment where people have taken time to meditate and visualize their white blood cells of their immune system. And as they are visualizing their white blood cells, as they're donating thought energy into those white blood cells, they're actually able to increase the quantity and the quality of those white blood cells simply by donating thought energy to this. There have been other experiments that have looked at changes in our DNA. So our DNA, or genetic material, is composed of chromosomes, and at the tip of these chromosomes is a telomere. And the telomere lets us know how healthy we are. The longer the telomere, the healthier we are. Our metabolic status is better. As a matter of fact, our biological age could be younger than our chronological age based upon the length of this telomere. What experiments have shown is that if we're able to think positively about our health and circumstances, we can change and lengthen the telomere, meaning that by lengthening this telomere, we are predicting that we would have better health. And for some people, we may be able to have greater longevity, all by depositing positive thought energy. So there's this whole study in medicine, and I won't go into this in great detail, called epigenetics. And it studies how our environment and our behaviors affect how our genes are expressed. So we can have genes that are dormant for disease and illness, and then be exposed to very tragic or difficult circumstances in our environment, or have a behavior and a lifestyle or thought life that has allowed for these negative genes of our health to be expressed. And I think that is, again, another part of the evidence that speaks about the important impact of thought energy now on our bodies. So just to recap where we've been so far, we've stated that everything has God-given energy. We've stated that our thoughts have God-given energy. And then we said that, our thought energy changes our bodies, right? So this is probably the most controversial part of our talk today. What if our thought energy could change our external world? What if our thoughts could change the world that's outside of us? So this brings in this whole dimension of quantum physics. And we've noted that, previously when we think about physics and energy and laws of nature, um, we actually thought in a very elementary and almost binary way. But now with quantum physics, as we now understand that even energy can exist in two different states, it has broadened our understanding of the capabilities of what actually takes place within our physical existence. Right? So this was challenged, and there was an experiment that really looked at this phenomenon called the observer effect. And what that kind of the best way to summarize that is that as we are able to monitor energy in experiments, when the person who's conducting the experiment has the opportunity to actually observe the energy, meaning that they're actually able to devote some mental capacity to observe it, donating thought energy, what we see happen is that the energy changes. The energy that we're monitoring changes according to whether we observe it or not. So that yields this big possibility that human observation can change the behavior of energy. And if human observation can change the behavior of energy, then our mental activity has the capability of changing things outside of ourselves. So there was an experiment, and in this experiment, they had people to hold test tubes of placenta DNA. And they had 28 researchers that were trained to have thoughts or emotion that was related to things that were very positive and related to things that were negative. So people were thought on things that were of love, peace, and rest and serenity. And then they had other people who had the test tubes, and they were to think of things that were negative, sadness, fear, and aggression. And what they found as people were holding the test tubes, and as they studied them after they donated this thought energy, that people who thought on things that were positive actually were able to unravel the DNA in the brain simply by thinking on these things. The people who thought on things that were negative, it actually did the opposite. The DNA actually became tighter and shorter, demonstrating that when we're able to even devote or donate thought energy to things outside of ourselves, we're able to have an effect. So the question is, Dr. Moss, what if we're already using this thought energy? What if in our existence in day-to-day, before we had this discussion, what if I'm already using this thought energy? What if we have this big ball of energy and we're using it recklessly? What if we tend to ponder and meditate and think on the negative things that are around us? Think about the guilt, shame, think about the anxiety, things that worry us, knowing that those thought patterns will have an effect on our bodies. Also importantly, that these thought patterns might actually create negative changes for the life that we live that's outside of us. So, what if we were to worry so much about illness with our negative thought energy that we were to affect the HPA axis in our brain, and we were to start to release all of this cortisol and all of these inflammatory chemicals, and then we start to have body inflammation that results in obesity, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and cancer. What if we're already using this thought energy in a very negative way that's already affecting our bodies? And then this, if we were to take this bigger, what if this thought energy that we have, that we says has the potential, we think, to influence our eternal world? What if many of us were to have the same thought? What if we got a group of people and we were all unified and we were on the same wavelength with thought energy? What if we were all on the same wavelength and same thoughts with this thought energy, and we were to think of peace, serenity, right? Fulfillment? What would be the consequence? What would happen? What if we all had this same thought energy and we thought about destruction, we thought anger, and we thought hatred? What would happen potentially as a result of that? I believe this thought energy is real, and it not only affects our mental health and our physical health, it affects our existence around us, but this thought energy affects our world. So, as we move forward, I'm just thinking a little bit about, how my existence and how I'm kind of putting this all together. I grew up in a church, probably like many of you, and I've heard sermon after sermon and read the Bible, and some of the things in the Bible we read it so much sometimes that we develop a superficial attachment to it. And one of those things that I heard when I was young, and I've heard now that I'm much older, is the scripture that talks about thinking on these things. Think on these things. And before 3 years ago, perhaps it was pretty superficial with me, but then as I started to do more research and I started to understand about this issue of thought energy, maybe there's more to more than we know as we dig deeper into the scripture, into the Bible. So this scripture so happens to be in Philippians 4:8, and we'll read it. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is worthy of respect, whatever is right and confirmed and wholesome, whatever is lovely and brings peace, whatever is admirable and of good repute. If there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, Scripture says to think continually on these things. So why would we need to think continually on this? Why would we need to meditate on these things, to sit in our mind on them and plant them in our heart? Why would we need to focus on this? Why should we devote thought energy to this? I think there's a lot that can help us mentally and physically, and even help us to understand science. We have a lot of that is in Scripture. So what if, instead of complaining about what our job is like and how much we hate our boss and we don't like going into work all day, instead of devoting all of that thought energy to that Monday through Friday, we were to devote thought energy into the job that we want to have, the environment that we want to work in, or perhaps even how we want to create our own job or business? What if we were to use our thought energy for that instead? What if we were to, instead of thinking about how much pain that we're in and how out of shape that we are, or complaining to think and even vocalize about how tired we are all the time, what if we change that thought energy to think about health and wellness and what it'd be like to be more active, what it'd be like to feel better and have more energy? What if we were to start thinking that instead? What if we were, instead of complaining about our spouses or our family and kids and continue to give negative energy to that, whether it's by worry or anger, what if we were to think about the marriage that we want? Think about what we would want our family to be, or to think about the goals that you want to have in these intimate relationships. What if we deposit our thoughts to that? Instead of thinking about how much money we don't have and how many bills we have and how our money's not going far enough, and what if we were to think about having more money to take care of ourselves, or having those things that we need? Think about those things and being able to obtain those things, to having that level of fulfillment, instead of thinking day in and day out about our wants or our deficits. And you can take that thought pattern, even if we think about relationships and loneliness and discord, and think about positivity and connectedness. We can take that in a whole number of directions. Just to sum this up, God has given us this great gift of thought energy, and we can use that to be able to improve our health. We can use that to be able to improve our relationships, to improve our finances, to improve the world around us. We actually have this God-given energy in our thoughts to be able to do that. So where do we go from here? Well, I have a few ideas. First, I'd like to thank you for joining me today. But what I would like to do is actually take this further. This is the first of a series of talks that I'll be doing throughout the next few months, expanding upon this issue of thought energy, but also the daily application of things that we can do for maintenance and creating strength with this. So we'll talk about how we can seize the power around us. We'll talk about how we can speak to our subconscious. We'll speak on daily rituals that can enrich our ability for manifestation. We'll talk about positive and toxic exposures. We'll also talk about there's power in what we say. These are some of the discussions that I have moving forward. As far as what we're doing with our practice, I've already started having some of these discussions with our Men's Genesis program, and I hope to be able to soon have a group that some of our patients will be able to attend. It should be more like a seminar that we'll run, so that we can learn more about harnessing our thoughts and being able to have greater wellness. Hey, I thank you for joining us today. If you have interest in what I've talked about, please send comments either to LinkedIn, to YouTube, or to Facebook. I would appreciate any other feedback you can give on today's presentation. And I pray that you have an awesome day and that you will make best use of your thought energy. Hey, God bless you, and you guys take care.